Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, there are many forms of violence that exist in society. Real violence, fictional violence, violence in games, violence in movies. What we're going to do from side opposition in this debate is to tell you specifically why violent sports and this type of violence is important and why it's important to have it on a public stage on TV. We heard from that side of the house a very, very soft case saying, we'll ban it from public TV, but if they pay, they can watch it. As long as they have money, they can watch it. Let's consider something. A lot of the people that watch these sports in the first place are adults who have jobs, who have money, and therefore, if they think there's a problem right now, that case doesn't solve much of it in the first place. They should be willing to ban the showing of it on paper, on like PVV as well, right? If they really believe in what they're saying. But moreover, let's look at that argument. They told us it's real violence because they're pounding it to the ground. But let's also look at what Lynn told us as well. She said that there's different intent in these sports. That the intent is to win, to not give up, to fight for your titleship, and to defend your crown, right? We think that the main aim of this sport in the first place is sports, is competition, and we think it's completely different from random violence that occurs in bars, in fights on the street. The people watching these sports also understand that it is a sport. So therefore, these people who watch it, i.e. Lynn, you won't go out on the streets and randomly hand off guys because you think it's good or because you think it's fun. People understand the concept that it's sports, and we don't necessarily think that there's that, you know, it's a big, it's like violence in the first place. What we're going to bring to you today is a couple of things. Firstly, I'm going to tell you about violence and why violence isn't a blanket thing and why there's a differentiation amongst the term violence in the first place. Secondly, why there's a value for having discussion on violence and why that's going to be better created by having these sports on TVs. And thirdly, why when you take away the coverage on public TV, you rather make these sports more violent and more problematic to the extent that that side of the house is thinking it is. So firstly, about violent sports. It's not just about violence. You have strict rules within the sports as well, and it's different from a glorification or a celebration of the violent action in the first place, or of torture, of hurting other people in the first place. It's different from movies such as The Saw, where, you know, the guy just smiles and laughs continuously as they keep on chopping off your fingers, right? It's about power, but it's also about restraint of that power. It's also about control within that violence. It's also about being able to have control and discipline and dedication in order to achieve your final goal, which is to win the competition in itself. At the end of the day, these are people who recognize the fact that they are sports players, recognize the fact that the opponent is a sports player as well, and at the end of the day have respect for each other, for those who are able to win. We think that this is completely different from the types of violence that you see on the streets, where you have random violence occurs because of drunk people and so on and so forth, right? We think when you compare a situation of when you have a kid who just wants to inherently punch other people and cause trouble, and another kid who is learning martial arts and trying to complete his techniques and master the arts of that sport, I think there's a complete difference, even if the action may be the same. The complete intent and the goals and aims of that violence in itself, of that action, is different. We think we need to recognize the fact that these people are not punching in order to injure the other people, but merely doing so in order to win the competition at the end of the day. If they truly believe that people are going to be influenced by watching these sports, then we think that the influence isn't necessarily going to be the influence of becoming violent as well, but rather going to be an influence of understanding dedication, to develop yourself, to control yourself, to master the techniques of that sport. We think when you consider that complete inherent difference that exists, we think violent sports and other types of violence, we think it's important to have this still on TV. Yeah.
Look, the martial arts that you portrayed in your speech, that you're learning martial arts, you get points from landing combinations and using skills. In MMA, in boxing, it's really just about beating the shit out of the other guy.
But the reason why they do so isn't because they want to beat the shit out of the other guy, but because they want to win the competition. That's different. So secondly, we believe that there is a value in having discussion on this types of violence in the first place. When you have the media and the TV and the public television allowing access for it, it opens up access to many people within society as well. It allows for people, and it allows for the maximum number of people to join the discourse on violence. When you consider the fact that the aspect of violence in itself is inherently something that exists in human society, when you consider the fact that it's something that never goes away, it has existed from the days back in Rome, like having gladiators and all that, it's an aspect which exists inherently as human beings. Therefore, the difference is this. From our side of the house, we're willing to show that to the people, we're willing to face up to the violence that exists inherently within us and try and control it and try and create a moderated discussion on that in comparison to that side of the house who want to shy away from it and try and hide it behind closed doors. We think it's better to have it out in the open when you can have a better discussion and a better discourse on how do we go about tackling the aspect of violence. But moreover, when you take away the media portrayal of these violent sports in the first place, you lose a couple of things. Number one, you lose the intent of these sports in the first place to be marketable. You lose the appeal to try and appeal to the other people, meaning you're just going to create a situation where they're more likely to become just like fight clubs, where it rather becomes a celebration of violence, where it rather becomes a celebration of the violent intent and fighting and punching and so on. We think that this is something which is curtailed by having media coverage, because firstly you create pressure from society to have medics, to have referees, to have a controlled environment in the first place, because obviously people care for it, but moreover from within the community itself you have the creation of a willingness to try and become more neutral, to try and become more moderate, because the more moderate you are, the more appealing you are towards the general public, obviously it's going to be more marketable for those corporations, for the sports in general, and therefore it allows them to reach out to a larger audience, meaning it's going to be a better goal for that sport inherently as well. So at the end of the day, there's two different worlds. Our world, we try and understand the fact that there is violence inherently in human beings, we try and face up to that fact, and we try and take care of it. On their side, they conveniently push it out of sight without understanding, but without really eradicating the aspect of violence, which then means it becomes much more violent and rather problematic under that scenario.